Hello and welcome. Today I'm going to be talking about the Understanding by Design template, explicitly stage 3 of that template. When you go ahead to do stage 3, you want to make sure that you are aligning your stage 3 plan with both stage 1 and stage 2. So make sure that you've already had an idea or you've worked on those stages before this. In stage 3, it is all about your students and all about what the students will be doing and will be thinking. So you want to make sure you have that perspective in mind before we start. So I'm going to be walking you through this step by step. Let's go ahead and start. So to begin, we are going to be talking about the stage 3 section of our Understanding by Design template today. Our stage 3 section is all about planning our learning experiences for those students. You want to make sure you have the perspective of the students in mind. Scrolling down here, we have our first section, which is going to be our Where to learning plan. So our Where to learning plan, this first section here is going to talk about the W. The W is to help to know where the unit is going and what you are expecting out of those students. Help yourself or the teacher know where the students are coming from, so any prior knowledge or interest that they may have. And you are going to create your SMART learning objectives. For these to be SMART learning objectives, you need to make sure they are specific, measurable, attainable, so something that they can actually do, results focused specifically, and time focused. How long are you going to give them to do this, and what are you going to be looking for? You need to make sure that they're measurable. So just being able to see something isn't necessarily measurable. You're going to have to add some sort of verb in there. Bloom's taxonomy has a good list of verbs that you can use for your SMART learning objectives, which I would recommend. Always looking at a good verb that you can use in order to better prepare your students to know exactly where they are going. This is really helpful, especially if you have students to be involved in their learning. They also want to know what their end goal is. And instead of just going right to the lesson and teaching them, you want to make sure that you're giving them the chance to understand why they are learning what they are learning. In order to tell them that, it really puts the focus back into their hands and they can then control their learning. When you do learning objectives or SMART learning objectives, you want to make sure that you have just as many as you need, not too many, but also not too less. What I did throughout this section was I went through back up into stage 2 and stage 1 because you want to make sure that everything aligns. And you're going to want to take a look at what you planned for your evidence. Is your evidence them being able to define something? Then you would use define whatever you want them to do. Make sure that you're aligning regardless. You want to make sure that your SMART learning objectives here match whatever you had in stage 1 and stage 2. Moving forward, we then get to our R of our where to. What is the relevance of this lesson? What are the benefits to the students by completing this unit? Why should they do this? How will they benefit from learning this material? I think that is the biggest thing that we hear from our students is, why do I have to learn this? Why am I taking the time out of my day to learn this? Well, this is your chance as the instructor to tell them that, to give them that purpose back. So let them know why they're learning what they're learning. So go ahead and outline here, what are the benefits? Some of my examples here were more than just next year you're going to need this skill. What in life are they going to be using this skill to do? How will this help them in their future career goals, maybe? Even though I have third graders, they still have dreams. They still have goals, and they recognize that. They can relate to the learning because they have a sense of passion for it once you tell them how it's going to benefit them later on. I really think that this is super relevant to the learning plan, and I am so happy that this is in here. The next section is going to be your diagnosis. How will you know what they know before the lesson and what they know after the lesson? How will you test for misconceptions? The big point to talk about when it comes to diagnosis is why. Why do we take the time to do a pretest, or why do we take the time to do the diagnostics before the learning? This is so that you can take and see where those learning gaps are. Maybe you have a few students who are a few grades behind, or maybe you have a few students who already understand these materials and these learning objectives that you had put in stage 1 to where you might need to make the work a little bit harder. How are you getting this data? This is where this diagnostic stage really comes into effect. This, as a teacher, is huge. You want to make sure you're looking at this data to really understand your students, not only so that you can help tailor the learning to them, but maybe because then they're going to have a better benefit, or maybe you can then change the objectives that they need to be learning, or even the standards that they need to be learning. You're able to better tailor their learning to them, which I think in teaching is one of the most important things that you can do. So make sure that you're doing some sort of diagnostic, some sort of pre-assessment to test where their knowledge and skill base is before you start the learning. And if you haven't came up with one yet, please do this now so that you can have a good foundation for your learning plan. Not only that, but it's also a good measure so then they take it again later on in the year and you can assess how well that learning plan went. What did they get out of it? Did they really truly understand those learning objectives? Did they show you that evidence? Maybe we need to revise for the next time we teach this unit. The diagnostic gives us as evaluators so much important information that I think it's a pivotal point that I need to point out here. Up next is the hook and the hold. This is probably one of the students' favorite things. How will you hook and hold the student interest? Now, I'm not just talking at the beginning of the lesson, but all the way throughout the unit. Kids often will have a hook, or most lessons have a hook at the beginning of a lesson, and then it's just information knowledge throughout. What are you going to do to help hold those students interested? They not only need to be invested, but they need to forget that they are learning and forget what they are doing and really have a sole purpose in this. They understand that they are learning for a reason. They are invested in this, and you want them to just have so much fun that they forget where they're at and what they are doing. They are invested. Technology helps with that, obviously. So how will you use technology in order to hook your students and get them interested and engaged? A good engaged lesson is them being full body all into the unit. Their brain is involved. Maybe they're doing some sort of motor activity. They're just all in, ready to learn the material because you have them engaged. They aren't thinking about something else. They aren't thinking about lunch. They aren't thinking about the time. They are interested in learning this lesson because you have given them the tools. This is where you need to list out those tools. What sort of technology components are you going to do? Maybe this is where you show a video to get them interested, or maybe you do a what do you already know about this topic, and then you pull up something, a picture maybe even, just to spark their conversation. Something as simple as just a picture on an internet search can be a good hook, something to keep them in the line. One of the things that my students love the most is weird or interesting facts. If I can find a weird or interesting fact about whatever we are learning about, they are all in the lesson. Then we have our experience and explore. The E is all about equipping our students to help them explore those key details and really get to those issues. How will they truly uncover the meaning of the unit? As the instructor in stage 1, we came up with those standards. We know what we want our students to learn, but how are you going to get them there? How are you going to get them from those standards to show you on that evidence piece? What do they have to do? This is where you really get to tell us and tell your students the actual learning activities that they are going to get to take place. For example, it might be researching something on the internet and writing a paper. What are these students really doing? Get to the bottom of it in this section. Now, this next section I think might be the most important, the rethink, revise, and refine. I honestly think that teachers skip over this section all too often. This is where you are giving the students opportunities to rethink, revise, and refine their work in the unit. Not just having them do it, turn it in, graded, and it's done. This is where you're actively planning sections in this unit to let them rethink what they're doing, maybe fix it, revise it, and then redo it and return it in. I don't think there's any problem with this because your end goal is them learning, not for them to be perfect on the first try. And after all, we are all human. We are not perfect on the first try. Give them that opportunity to be human, to revise their work and fix it based on what you want and what they understand that maybe they didn't do correctly the first time. I think that in itself may be bigger than the learning process in itself. Next is the reflect and self-regulate. Going right along with them rethinking, you want to make sure that they have time to think out and actually self-regulate. Are they understanding the material? Are they getting frustrated because they aren't understanding it right away? Are they getting mad that they have to edit and turn it back in? Are they rushing through the work just to get done because they aren't understanding the benefit that it has to them? Make sure that you have some sort of self-assessment. This could be as easy as are you understanding it? Thumbs up, thumbs down. This could be as easy as an exit ticket where they tell you what you learned for the day. And if they can't tell you one single thing that they learned for the day, well, did they not do the work or do they not just understand? This can be a good section for both the teacher and the student to reflect and think about what they've already learned. My favorite section is the evaluate section, allowing students to get formative feedback in order to improve their work. I do formative feedback all the time. I am trying to do so much feedback this year, and I hope that I see it in their results. How will these students get formative feedback so that they can improve their work and move toward mastering their learning objectives? After all, that is your goal, for them to master the learning objectives. Formative feedback may be a quiz where you give them the answers afterwards and they can then retry the quiz, or maybe the standards loop back around in a spiral and they get to try again. Or maybe it's an assignment where you tell them, okay, well, you missed some capitalization and some punctuation on this one. This is your grade this time, but you're going to have a very similar assignment where you can take this feedback and implement it and do better next time. This is something that happens often in higher education, and I think that we should make it a priority to make it happening in K through 12 setting as well. These students need a chance to get your feedback and improve on their learning. I love to spiral everything that I do. This is where I add prior knowledge into previous tests or prior knowledge and just loop the standards back around so that every single piece of feedback I can use, they can then fix whatever they need to later and understand it better. Master those learning objectives. Now, this last section is the T, or tailored. How are you going to assess and then meet the needs of all of your learners? How is it going to be utilized for technology enhanced learning experiences that differentiates based on your students? You can differentiate your content, your process, your product, or the learning environment based on where those students are at, their certain learning styles, maybe their interests, or maybe even just their personal goals. If you have a student who can read at a higher reading level, maybe you give them a different reading passage to read out of that has the same content, the same goals, they have the same transfers, the same meaning. You want the same things out of both of those students. One just reads at a higher reading level. You may give them a different passage to find that content, but at the end of the day, they are still going to master the same learning standards and learning objectives. You want to make sure that you don't mess with those learning objectives and keep it to just the process, the product, or the learning environment. Maybe you have a kid who needs to learn by themselves and they need to get taken out of the room to do an independent study lesson with one-on-one. That's okay. Maybe that learner needs that. This is your chance to detail all of that information here. O, organized using technology. You want to make sure that your lesson is organized in order to be learner-centered strategies. Sometimes teachers get carried away and they plan a really fun lesson, but it's not about the student, it's for them. Or maybe they plan a lesson that's really easy to teach, but it's boring and not fun for the student. How are you going to get the learner involved and list these out here? How will you ensure that your lesson is designed to meet the variety of learn-centered instructional strategies? Is it engaging? Are they having fun? But are they also meeting those learning objectives that you set out for them to meet? Now, you want to make sure you're organized, but also authentic. This is where it gets hard. You want to make sure that you engage your students in local and global interdisciplinary units in which technology will help the students assume professional roles, research real-world problems, collaborate with others, and produce products that are meaningful and useful to wide audiences. Now, what does this really mean? That it is a real-world skill. How are they going to take this knowledge and then transfer it to the outside world, out of that brick and mortar school setting? How are they going to use this in their real lives? This is your chance as an educator to put this in here so that you know how this is going to benefit them. Where are they going to take it? What are they going to do with it? And you have a chance to list out all of those real world problems right here. Then you want to make sure you are organized to creativity, higher order skills, and mental habits of mind. This is really important because kids need these skills. These skills go right along with those soft skills that you listed up in the other stages of this UbD template. You want to make sure that you are talking about their critical thinking skills, or maybe you have a student who, if they get the wrong answer, they shut down. Treating that student and understanding that that is okay, but that they need to self-regulate a little bit better and come up with a different solution than just shutting down and being over the learning. Work with those students and list out all of your ideas that you have here. It is great that you have a template that allows you to do so. How are you going to assess their learning? What are you going to do? How are you going to assess them formatively and summatively aligned to those standards? Some tests aren't aligned to the standards at all. Some have hidden standards in that you haven't been teaching. How are you going to explicitly make sure that these standards are being tested and that you're doing it using technology? This, I love to put any quizzes that I have in there or any end of unit assessments, just because I'm going to do that. Now, this also means that you could take a thumbs up, thumbs down quiz in class. Maybe you use clickers to utilize what they are understanding and how comfortable they feel. Whatever mode that you want to list them out here. And then at the end of the day, how are you going to analyze your data? How, at the end of the unit, going to look at everything the students did and say, yes, this absolutely worked, or maybe next time I need to try something different. How are you going to improve your instructional practice and really maximize that student learning? Did the students truly show you that evidence that you wanted from stage 2? Or next time, maybe we want to see something different. This is where you're going to tell everybody and yourself how you're going to look at that data. And sometimes this may be the hardest part. You think about the lesson, you have all these great ideas, and you want to move on. But in reality, that's not how things work. We want to make sure that we're getting better for ourselves and for our students, and this section allows you to outline that. Then at the very end of the template, they give us our resources because a lot of people are using the UbD process. So if you have any other questions, here are just some other resources that you can utilize. Thank you and have a great day.